Hi friends, welcome back, and I am today going to teach you all about stress urinary incontinence, which is a very common problem among women, something that I see every day in my office. And in fact, 1 in 4 women, 25% of women have stress incontinence. So it's a big problem. You may have this problem or know someone who does and want to learn more about it. So I'm going to educate you and inform you today. I'm going to tell you in this video what stress incontinence is, what causes it, and what the consequences are. And then we will then go from there. In the next video, we'll talk about the treatments of stress incontinence. So let's get started. Stress incontinence is the sudden loss of urine with a sudden stress, meaning a stress such as a cough, a sneeze, jumping, running, something that suddenly pushes abdominal pressure onto the bladder and pushes the urine out of the urethra. Quick anatomy lesson: your bladder is in the middle of your pelvis, you know where it is. Coming out of the bladder towards the outside is the urethra, which is a 2 to 3 inch long tube, and that is what holds the urine in around the urethra. There's some muscles there called pelvic floor muscles, and the sphincter. The sphincter, there's an external and an internal sphincter, and that sphincter automatically squeezes whenever you cough or sneeze or any of those other actions to hold the urine in, or otherwise every time we did that the urine would just push out. So when those sphincters and the pelvic floor muscles become deficient, then you start to have leakage, and that's the stress incontinence. So what causes it? Well, number one is genetic factors. So there's some women that in families that are more prone to it. They don't have as good collagen, they don't have as good of muscle tone. For some reason, they're just more prone to it. And I've seen girls as young as 12 years old that have this problem, competitive gymnasts and cheerleaders that have stress incontinence. And that's a genetic factor. Childbirth, that's a big one. So when we give birth, we push the baby through the birth canal, and it stretches the ligaments that hold the urethra up and the muscles. They get completely stretched out. Thank God he created us that they bounce back into position. But for some women, and especially if we're an older mom, they don't always bounce back the way that they do in the younger women. So that is a big factor, is childbirth. That really moves things around quite a bit. That's why we always say do Kegels after you give birth so that those muscles can get toned back up. Okay, aging. So as we age, each decade, we can see it in our face. The collagen, the gravity working on us, the skin is getting thinner. Well, the same thing is happening in our pelvis. Everything's dropping and drooping, and the muscle tone isn't as good. So each decade, the percentage of women that develop stress incontinence increases. So aging is a big factor. Being overweight or obese, that is a big factor because you're putting more pressure on your bladder, more abdominal pressure, pushing down on the bladder, pushing the urine out. Also, it strains your pelvic floor, so your pelvic floor is out of position and you can't hold the urine in as well. So losing weight is very beneficial for stress urinary incontinence. Prior surgery is a big factor. If you've actually had a bladder lift, that seems like that wouldn't cause stress incontinence, but it does, because it's not actually the bladder's fault that you're leaking, it's the urethra. And sometimes when the bladder is dropped and then it gets lifted, there's a kink at the bladder neck that was protecting you. And now that your bladder's lifted, the kink is gone, and now it's just a straight shot from the bladder out of the bladder neck through the urethra. So if those muscles are not strong the way that they need to be, then you'll have more leakage. And then the last major cause of stress urinary incontinence is how much activity that you do. So if you're more of an elite athlete, a power lifter, a lot of running, you're more likely to have this problem because you're putting a lot of strain on your pelvic floor. I love exercising. I've done triathlons and half marathons, so I'm not saying don't exercise because it's so good for you. I've also done CrossFit, and there's actually a lot of videos about people leaking with double unders with CrossFit. So it's a big deal. And I saw a study recently where they did a survey of Polish athletes, and I think it was 50 or 60% of these elite women athletes have stress incontinence. So it's a big problem and something that you can address. Okay, consequences, of course, with leaking urine and needing to wear pads or diapers, it causes a lot of personal distress. It prevents you from wanting to travel sometimes because you need so many pads or you're afraid you're going to embarrass yourself. It definitely affects activity levels, not wanting to exercise, not wanting to jump on the trampoline with your kids, not wanting to have sex sometimes. All of that causes distress. You don't feel feminine when you're leaking. You don't feel comfortable. You feel like everybody can smell the urine, although they really can't, I promise you. But it's very distressing. So if it is a problem for you, I want you to encourage you to go get help because there is good help available now. There are good options for you. Rashes, so the urine leakage in the pads can cause a rash on the pelvic floor, and that can itch, burn, be very irritating. So that's another reason that you want to get this taken care of. Many patients have told me that the 7th generation pads are less irritating to the perineum, so you may want to consider that in the meantime. And one of the biggest reasons why you should get this fixed sooner rather than later is because your bladder function will get worse and worse if you don't take care of this. So what starts out as a little bit of leakage becomes more leakage and more leakage. And then the bladder starts to get dysfunctional where it also starts to spasm. You have sudden spasm of urine and you lose the urine. You're just standing there washing your hands and it pours out. You start to have mixed incontinence. So the problem gets worse. So I always tell people to get it taken care of early because for one thing, you don't need to live with this. The solutions are simple and you definitely don't want to develop mixed incontinence. And I'll be doing another video about that very soon as well. So that is my mini lecture about stress urinary incontinence, the causes, the consequences. And the next video that I do, I'm going to go through a proper urological evaluation for stress urinary incontinence. So you know that if you're going to the doctor about this, you know that they're doing the right workup and right evaluation to prepare you for this. And then the various options for stress urinary incontinence, so you can know what your options are. So that covers it. Thanks for watching. I love you, and I ask for God to bless you. I pray for my patients, and I pray for you. And I hope that this helped you. If you found it informative, please give me a thumbs up below. You can subscribe to my channel, and also please ask any questions in the comments area. I'd love to hear what questions you have that I didn't think about. So please let me know if you have any questions at all. You can also see in the link in the text below the link to my website, and we do have an info line on there if you have any other questions. I'd be happy to help you out if you want to ask in private. All right, well, you take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.